the best innovations come from constraint. When you don't have the time, the budget, the resource, and you need to figure out how to get this thing done. And that comes from passion, that comes from, feedback, whatever your engine is, the thing that's kind of driving you to get it done. And then you just kind of like, you lean into the lessons of learning to do more with less.
Hey family, Chris Denson has a generous heart. And, whenever I think of him, I think of somebody who's just so brilliant that the simplicity of their humor and the dynamic of their intelligence meet at a place that we all can enjoy. And you're going to enjoy him now. Because you know what? We've invited him to talk with us here as an award-winning innovation advocate, a best-selling author, and a self-described recovering comedian. I happen to know that's true about Chris because I get to enjoy time with him off camera as well. Chris brings a refreshing blend of humor and insight to the innovation landscape, and his work spans from the White House to Fortune 500 companies. He's helped organizations and individuals break essential rules and reimagine what's possible in their lives, helping to reimagine what's possible in all of our lives. For us. It's how I think of him kind of like, from us, for us. This is his second time on the show, and I can joyfully say he is now a friend of the podcast as well as a friend of mine, Chris Denson. Welcome home, Dr. Chris.
I
like that. You're doing all kinds of things now, I should be careful, though, because in this age of fakery, I don't want people to say I'm bestowing degrees on you.
But I take a degree. It would make my mother proud to hear you say that. So
your mother's proud anyway. The work you're doing, the things you're doing are just so incredible. And as I shared with our family, I am so proud to call you a friend. And I'm really glad that you're back.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, you're on an incredible ride right now, though. I think it's one that's filled up with a lot of joy, and you're helping people, you're daring, and you're just doing some incredible insight work on many levels. How did you get here?
How did I get here? I feel like I was kidnapped. Sometimes you just wake up and you're like, oh, this is where I am. I think that's part of like the discovery. Sometimes in hindsight, the story unfolds, but I think I just always had like a curiosity about ideas and people, whether it was like stand up and observing the world and kind of bringing back a report of some sort and finding ways to make that entertaining, or like fast forward to my work in marketing and innovation. It's just like, what are people thinking, feeling, and how can we tap into that in really creative and interesting ways? And then I think more recently, what you're kind of speaking to is just kind of like really dipping into the psychology of the innovator's journey and helping people with that. And, how do we overcome a lot of the things we don't get to talk about when we're building, making, doing, and pursuing?
Well, most of the time when we speak as adults about a journey, we're talking about the one we're on going forward. And very seldom, and sometimes quite reluctantly, we will address the journey backward to see how we got here. I mean, you had childhood experiences in Detroit. You had family, how did they play into who you are right now? And how much of it was a choice of yours? I shouldn't ask you how much, because all of it was a choice of yours. But at what point did you know it was a choice of yours? How you internalized that and then used it to fuel who you were?
It was a funny point. Maybe like 3-4 years ago, somebody asked me on a podcast, and I was like, "Oh, I've never thought of it this way." But like kind of being raised by a single mom, who I have a brother and sister who are 12 and 13 years older than me, and but my parents got divorced the year I was born. So I kind of grew up like an only child. But it also...
And you feel the baby. We know you the baby.
Oh, okay? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? They
you got baby behavior. Okay, you got youngest child behavior.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I very much enjoy it. My sister's always like, well, we never got to... You always... And it's like, well, it was also different. I realized that my mom's kind of like going to college for the first time at 33, and I was an infant. And then she was also free from a 16-year marriage that she had been in since she was 18 with somebody she knew since she was 13. And it was like she's exploring life. And as a single parent, you bring your kid to all these things. So whether she was taking like dance lessons or roller skate, like I was just kind of there. And I was like, oh, that's kind of where my appetite for exploration was birthed, very subconsciously, like just showing up in different places and seeing a black woman in Detroit, like, let's see what skating's about. Let's see what belly dancing is. And I still have that. I'm like, I'll show up to most functions, just like, oh, let's see what's going on in here. I don't have to stick around. And some of them I do, and I stick around a lot longer, but I've worked in gaming and government and, startup ecosystems and so on and so forth, just out of like an undying sense of curiosity and openness to let's see what happens. And sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't.
You talk about showing up, just showing up. And right now, so much is going on in the world. And um, you think about people are showing up online, people are showing up in lines, people are showing up forming lines. It's a lot. Chris, when you think about showing up, you typically, as I've known you, and I'm so impressed with who you are as a person as well as a professional, you are there in front of a thing. I'm not suggesting you won't come in behind something. Oh, we don't like this. Let's go pick it. But I do think that you show up in front of things and you're such a thought innovator. The work you're doing with thought innovator. Yeah. Okay. The work you've been doing recently, coaching through visionology, what's the most surprising transformation you're witnessing in the people you're coaching? Not by name. I know you don't do that, but just on the whole, because like I said, some people show up after effects, some people show up before, but you're coaching people in some really unique and I think dynamic ways. So can you explain what visionology is to help the family know what we're talking about here? And then talk about what you're seeing.
Yeah, so visionology is something I created. I call it personal advisory for folks in the innovation economy. Individual small teams. In that process, kind of get a little bit more in the weeds. I took 75 hours of trauma recovery training. I took another 20 to 30 hours of psychedelic facilitation training. I'd already taken transformational leadership training and acting classes, and just kind of like, seeing how humans behave. But I also still love being in the trenches. I mean, I got a 6-foot whiteboard over there where I'm like, "Ooh, this is a cool idea. What if we did this?"
I saw that the last time we talked. And I'm like, Chris, what is all of that up
Oh,
there?
it was,
Are
yes.
you doing at-home tutoring? And you're doing it all for yourself.
Ever seen the movie Beautiful Mind, where he's just figuring out equation? That's my, and I erased it recently, so there's only one sentence written on there that says, "I welcome all the possibilities I never knew existed." Um, but with working with individuals and kind of just like, I don't know, when you're innovating anything or just trying to create something, it's a lonely journey, right? You have a vision that you see in the world that should belong there, and how do you go about doing that? Especially against a lot of opposition, whether you're trying to raise money and you're on your 95th pitch and nobody's giving you a dime yet, or you're at work and you're like, I know there's a better process here, and I keep telling everybody, and nobody, or I can see a better vision for what this department should be doing, or whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of things that come up from our past, our childhood, the last job we had, or the last time we tried to do something. And I don't think we address that enough, or to the degree by which it can free us and really create from a place of freedom. No matter like what your circumstances are, you can still be broke or challenged or have life shit coming up or whatever it might be. But like, can you still walk with a sense of freedom through all of that? And then on the second half, not that there's any order, but on the other part of this, I've kind of just become a thought partner and like, all right, well, have you thought about doing it this way? Let's talk about your messaging. How do you want to behave in the marketplace? So you talk about showing up. Like showing up is interesting, especially in a culture that feels like you always have to be on. And so now you're just showing up to show up rather than showing up with a reason, a purpose, a strategy, some form of depth. Um, and I believe in this concept. This is how I operate. I'm like, I'm an observer and a fast follower. right? So I'm like, okay, what is everybody doing? Thing even in the agency world, it's just like, all right, let's look at our competitor landscape and see what the common traits are, and then where can we pivot left in a very meaningful way. And what are our resources and tools and platforms and communication styles that are available to us in order to accomplish that. But for the most part, like, we all have our like emotional blocks and invisible blocks that get in the way of achieving our highest potential. And that's why, like, up and down the spectrum, I've worked with C-suite individuals as well as like mom and pop Joe Schmo first time entrepreneurs.
United Nations, Omnicom Media Group.
Sure. Yes,
Yeah,
you can say the names.
yeah.
GM Macro, like they created a marketing academy. I just finished a thing for Cannes Lions. They have a creative MBA program, so I did a visionology workshop for them. Velvet Sea Ventures, shout out to Mike and Cass Lazaro. But
So what happens in a visionology workshop? I know you curate to the client, but what can be expected to happen? Why is somebody going to come to you, and what are they going to expect to have happen?
I like people to encounter themselves in a way that they haven't encountered themselves before. And so I have a lot of like, I have a whole list of prompts and questions and things that are really, giving away a little bit of the secret sauce, are kind of like side door entry points to whatever story it is you're living. Right. And when I was hosting and doing a lot of this kind of stuff, like interviewing, I always try to find like different entry points to this a similar topic. And most times I felt like the biggest compliment I could get is like, I've never thought of my story that way. And it could be somebody like you, right? Like, is like, oh, I've never looked at it that way before. And I have it, look, I have a tattoo. Part of it says, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will begin to change.
Somebody just approached me this past week. I was over at the Milken Institute and I reconnected with some people, and I was approached. Everybody's always looking for content, right? And they were pretty serious, I think, Chris, and they were saying, okay, we want to do your life story. And I've been asked that before. These people were kind of serious, and
Can I
they,
play you? Can
and
I
they
can I audition to play you?
oh yeah, I love that. Oh my God, talk about elevating me. Woo! Yes, I love it. Ain't no hurt on that for me. Um, and I'm serious about that. They and when we talk more, you'll know I am. Um, they were going. I'm like, oh, I'm still living my life. But when you think about that, you're saying having us think about our lives in different ways than we have before. I went immediately back to the conversation you and I recently had when I was asked that question. So even though I'm not in a visionology workshop right now, I can feel based on the conversation you and I had, which was what motivated me to ask you to come on to here, because there's so many things we could talk about. I really wanted you to be able to dig into that, understanding that our family is composed of many people who are leaders in organizations. Some of them are leaders in tech organizations, redefining how they operate right now, as well as who they are, because tech has to keep growing or it's old, right? Um, and then we've got entrepreneurs who are listening right now. I wanted to make sure that the audience that who I serve got an opportunity to learn about what you're doing. I think it's amazing, and I don't try to speak it for you. So that's why I'm asking what's going to happen for us, if
Yeah.
somebody's calling you.
Um, it's a lot of export. Somebody once asked me, like, what similar question? Like, what is the most common thing your clients have, problems with? And I was like, a lot of them don't know, right? A lot of them are high achievers, and it's just like something's not working. I don't know. Like, I know how to do a lot of things well, and I don't know what it is that I'm potentially not doing well. And so that becomes a little recalibration. Let's revisit some of the hows and whys. I mean, I had one client who was the head of D&I at a very large company, and started a company, was a little frustrated with how it was going. And by the time we stopped working with her, she's like, I don't want to do this company anymore. Because and the only reason was, not the only reason, but the primary reason was like, we talked about the mission. right? You can form a company to accomplish the mission. You can go in house somewhere to accomplish the mission. The mission can be, executed in many different ways. So most of us have like a linear mode of like, oh, you do this, then you do that, then you do this. And for innovation, it's never as linear as it looks, right? It's unsexy, it's broken. You pivot, you find something along the way. You
And
have
you got to clear for blind spots.
you have to clear for the you're clearing the path of these things and going like, okay, I've been looking through this like this pinhole, but now like I have a wider view of possibility. And I just try to bring that out in people. And I don't like, and these are people like who are extremely successful. So, and I think that's almost the gift and the curse. It's like, oh, I know how to do this, right? And the beginner's mindset says, I don't know a thing. And I, try to do it with like levity, and we have fun, and we talk about like life stuff. I've talked about illnesses and so on and so forth, and then the other part of it, I think you're leaning into, is because of the psychedelic facilitation training. I sometimes offer that in as part of the experience. Not everybody is up for it, but what I always say if I'm on an elevator talking to somebody, I go, oh, and what do you do for a living? I say I like to help people unlock new levels of ingenuity. And one is that is through visionology. Let's talk it out and like get you to a new level or maybe a completely different playing field. And then two is content and storytelling. I still work with Ken Lyons and Fast Company and so on and so forth. And the third is psychedelic facilitation. So, and even in the content space, I'm getting guests and driving conversation that gives people nuggets of information in how they can unlock new levels of ingenuity. And then psychedelics, that's very macro. And also like I know what I look like and sound like, and I know what certain people endemic to these industries or these modes of vocation look and sound and feel like. And I feel like I get to be hopefully like a little bit of a breath of fresh air and like.
Well, do you bring your comedy to it,
Oh,
or
absolutely. Like I'm nutty, I'm offensive, I cuss a lot, but I also have like a big heart. I'm into the mysticism of it all. I stay like really grounded and connected. I like don't bring my own agenda to the table. It's really, I think when you're in service business of any sort, it's like give them what they want, not what you want to give them. So I've said something to people where I'm like, this is gold in my brain. I didn't, say it out loud, but it maybe doesn't resonate with them, and that's fine. Like, but let's find the lanes that do.
we dropped some names? We dropped some names. I mentioned the United Nations and Omnicom, but when you work with all these companies you've worked with, these people you've worked with, where do you see common leadership blind spots that prevent true innovation?
There was one company, and there was a new head of marketing. There was a 300-person marketing organization in there, and he was brought in to be sort of the new innovator at this organization, especially from a marketing and brand presence perspective. And my dog's going berserk right now at the garbage.
You want to bring your dog in?
No, because then she'll just be barking in here.
Okay.
But you can meet her at some point. Her name's Fiona.
Okay.
And it was like I gave them permission to break things and go forth and and be innovative, and I'll take the hits for it. Like I gave them all this permission. They didn't take it. And that became really frustrating for him and for them. And it's like sometimes it's like, well, did you say this? No. Like sometimes it's really simple things we just overlook. And sometimes and those simple things can lead to really big macro shifts. And so actually I worked with him individually, and then I went in and did a series of workshops for each group of, those teams, to get them to what I call break good habits, right? Because it's like the company's already successful. I've had my job for 10, 15 years. We're doing great. All right. Well, you've done a lot of things well. Let's break some of those habits and to get you to, again, to expand.
A lot of folks say if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And so you're coming in kind of counterintuitively.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I heard the other half of that quote, which is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you can make it better.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's where, to your point earlier, where a lot of companies fall behind, right? Okay, we're doing great, right? We've heard these stories for decades. The Blockbuster, Now Target. Like there's a bunch of organizations that fail to like adapt because things are going pretty well. And so, that's where you get into how do you build in even a structure to allow for experimentation and, innovation and build an appetite for let's just explore some stuff and see what's out there. And there are like very refined business structures to do that with. Where it sounds like a little hoity-toity or like, oh, you get to play in a sandbox all day. It's like, no, you can also do that in a way that has a bottom line and KPIs and ROIs and all the things that come along with it. But you can still enter it with a sense of ease and purpose. I will say the other thing when you asked about the leadership is, pressure, the wrong kind of pressure can disrupt productivity. So one of the trauma trainings I took was in trauma of money. And yes, if you're an up and coming, painter and you're trying to sell your works, that's one thing. What's your relationship with money? But also, if you're the CEO of an organization and you're running the organization from a scarcity mindset, and like that energy trickles down into the people that are like toiling away at their computers and showing up in meetings. They're working from a sense of nervousness, and if this doesn't work, then we're done, or whatever it might be. And so I think those are other kinds of blind spots that people don't necessarily see. It's just like how their psychology shows up. I think permission is another big one, especially when it comes to pure innovation. Um, it's things like we learned our relationship with permission from our parents. When you did well, great, pat on the head. When you did well and when you did poorly, it depends on who your parents are. Some of us, like I grew up in the whoopings era. Some people like it's punishment, or I'm taking your phone away.
Just ho. You got to explain what whoopings is.
Oh, you said it correctly. Um, what whoopings is? It's just spanking. Yeah, but usually like, all right, you didn't do this, or you didn't do what I told you, or you lied, or whatever the offense was, and it ends with like a spanking of some sort.
And this is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you, and
Right.
then
All the love language,
Frank kind of hug.
right, and the love languages that we form, and so on and so forth. So now here you are, 30 years later, doing your business, and you're like, oh, if I get this wrong, I'm going to get in so much trouble. I have a client now who just created a department at an agency, and as they're entering this space, it's like they're really nervous about performance, and I'm like, we have to re-empower, we have to reparent, we have to like, and then come up with like just in the room strategies for that person to feel a little bit more freedom and permission to like ch- go big, like figure it out, and like you re-engage with the traits that got her there, and do away with the ones that are fear-based.
Let's stay here a little bit longer
Yeah.
though. So some of the members of our family are recent college grads or entrepreneurs who are just starting their businesses
Mhm.
and they have limited resources. So how do you counterintuitively advise them around innovation and entrepreneurship in ways that can be helpful to them and um, and still allows them to take full advantage of the space they operate within?
Well, there was an article a few years ago that I was cited in. It was a Forbes article, and it talked about how some of the best innovations come from constraint. When you don't have the time, the budget, the resource, and you need to figure out how to get this thing done. And that comes from passion, that comes from, feedback, whatever your engine is, the thing that's kind of driving you to get it done. And then you just kind of like you lean into the lessons of learning to do more with less. I've had a client when I was in the agency world who was a shoe brand, and they were like, "Well, that's something Nike would." Every idea that we had, they were like, "Well, that's something they would do, and that's going to cost you." Like we're not even in the business side of it yet. We can always reverse engineer. If you tell me you have $500,000 or $5,000, we can reverse engineer and figure out a way to get it done. That is where the ingenuity is. It's not in the out. Like most of us go like, "Oh, AI is innovative." It's all the little steps in the gears and things that like are fine tuned in order to make that thing a thing to begin with. And so if we learn to like hone in on those processes and those ways of getting it done. I mean, I love going back and looking at like old pitch decks for giant companies and seeing like, oh, Amazon didn't always look like this. Uber didn't always look like that. Act one, right? Like I think that we all have a V1. And I think most of us have a vision in our head of what we want to create, and it looks like it's fully done, it's polished, it's been around for 30 years, right? And we were blinded by that we don't even take step one because like, oh, well, if it's not, and people are going to think, and blah blah blah. I was like, start somewhere. Somebody sent me a video the other day, and I was like, if the video was garbage, the idea was great,
Mm-hmm.
and I was
Well,
like,
you
go ahead,
you
sorry.
you Chris, you talk about you and you finish that thought. Incorporate this into it because you talk about work that is serious work, even though you're bringing a very positive energy to it in a way that a lot of people don't. A lot of people get serious and, they start to follow the outline. And for someone listening to you, and seeing you, you talked about playing me in my life story. You look like Holly Golightly. You know who Holly Golightly
No, I
is,
don't know
right?
what how they go like that.
Do you know who Holly Golightly is?
No, who's that?
Uh, have you ever breakfast at Tiffany's?
Oh, got you. Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
so when you see Audrey Hepburn playing, this beautiful, beautiful thing, who's
Hmm.
also very serious and has been through some stuff. The point I'm
Hmm.
getting to, you don't look like you've been through stuff, and we all kind of accept that it takes pressure to create diamonds, whether they are pulled out of the ground or formed in a lab, right? Our greatest challenges often lead us to our greatest strengths. And coaching people through innovation toward their own success is a strength that I've seen you exhibit for some really serious people, some really serious brands with phenomenal outcomes. Share some of that extreme pressure in your career with the family listening right now that helps them understand how you can speak so strongly to help them create what for them otherwise might have been unexpected breakthroughs.
Yeah. Well, thank you for complimenting my appearance. The
You know
I
you
wore flowers for you. I couldn't bring you
You
flowers.
know you cute. You know you cute.
I couldn't bring you
Okay.
flowers in real life, so I wore my flower shirt.
Yeah, you did.
I'm a open book. I mean, I've lived out of my car, for a period of time after like I was publicly known in some capacity. I don't know, I've had relationship issues. I've lived a lot of life. When growing up in Detroit is not for the weak, right? And so whether being robbed at gunpoint or losing a job, I mean, I don't know. There was a period even like 4 years ago where I was working for an agency, got laid off unexpectedly. I had two clients that were paying me really well on the side. Like I had two, side clients. All those things went away within 3 weeks. Like one client was a startup that got acquired, and that was paying me five figures annually. Another client, that my point of contact got a new job, and so they were like, "Oh, you'll talk to Sally," and never heard from Sally. And that was after working with them for a year and a half. So and I went like literally down to $0 of income at what I felt like was a peak of my career. And so to like the gains and losses and highs and lows and like learning to like Alan Watts talks about this. There's a book called The Watercourse Way. And it's just like the yin and yang of it all is like, unfortunate things happen and really fortunate things happen. How can you learn to temper your energy and your emotionality to like live in that sweet spot? And I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for years. I told my therapist this maybe, I don't know, sometime last year, but I was like, I feel like I'm standing in the center of a tornado. And I was like, I'm not being sucked up into it, but I can see the car and the cow and the barn door. And like, I could get hit by something. I don't know. I could get sucked up by something.
Dorothy grabbed Toto, right?
Right. Or Fiona.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and I'm like, so I've not that I've mastered it, but I've gotten a lot better at returning to center when things go. And I've also like developed a lot of tools, and I try to give people the tools that I know, or at least even the tool of like, let me go find some tools. Right? But that could be affirmations, that could be a meditation, that could be a different way of, like this person that I've mentioned that has a new job. First meeting at the agency, I was like, write this reminder at the top of your notebook as you're taking notes. This is a reminder to yourself and how you want to show up in this meeting. And like I do that almost on a daily. Whatever is a reminder for me for the moment I'm living through, I'm like, okay, just heart first, or lose your agenda, whatever. And then I show up and I'm like, ooh, let's talk about whiz bangs and sending stuff to space, and whatever the creative opportunity is.
It's important that people understand that you're not just speaking from an academic perspective, you're speaking from a lived perspective, and not just how you've helped others improve their lives, but how you've lived it yourself. You can bring so much substance and so much clarity to it. I mean, think about it. After interviewing over 200 innovators on your own podcast, you've had an opportunity to observe personality traits and uh, various approaches that groundbreaking innovators share. So, I think that's really credible to you. And why don't you just share a little bit of what are some of those personality traits you've seen
Yeah.
that exhibit themselves, especially those that people can adopt or adapt as
Hmm.
behaviors into their lives?
Yeah. You mentioned, it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about rule breakers, right? And I wrote a book in 2018. It was called 10 Essential Rules for Breaking Essential Rules. And, the first one I talk about is empathy, and how we can get to know the people we're creating for, the people we're creating with, and ourselves in the process. Because I think that's where it starts. So, like, let's not forget, all this shit is for human beings, right? Maybe it's for some animals, or but at the end of the day, we all live here, and we are creating ease, joy, whatever the product or service is you're doing. And I think there is this deep sense of how far can I go to understand the people that in that cycle of humanality. I don't know if humanality is a word, but now it is. It is now. Sniglets. And then, I think there's things like, a lot of us have like a native energy, or a native trait that we overlook. You know, Jay-Z once said in an interview, he's like, I didn't realize what I had was a gift because it came easy to me. Most people think the path is supposed to be hard, or or they assume that they undervalue something. One of my interviews long ago, I interviewed Miguel McKelvey, the other co-founder of WeWork, and I got a tip beforehand that he had grown up in communal living. So, like, his mom and her two best friends all lived together, and they were all single parents, and they shared resources and rides to school and homeworks and tutors and meals. Um, and of course, that was baked into the DNA of WeWork, right? To the point of, fun fact, like, their hallways were designed to be narrower to force encounters of people. So you are like, oh, sorry, I'm like, oh, what's your name again? I keep seeing you here, right? As opposed to like a giant hallway where you don't even have to make eye contact. And so everything about WeWork was kind of, not everything, but a lot of it was designed for communal resource and coming together and collaborative building. And I find that a lot where there's something in you, like you talked about when you asked me about myself, and like, oh, in hindsight, it was my mom that I got this appetite for exploration from. And it is okay for me to work in this domain, in that domain, in this other one, because it comes naturally to me. No, it doesn't come naturally to everybody. And there's certain traits that people have that come very easily to them that also don't. And so I think that, like, just being in touch with all your different parts is one trait. I think, having searching for the goosebumps. I'm getting them now, which while I'm talking, but like, there's good ideas and then there's goosebump ideas, right? There's always the smart thing to do. There's always the logical thing to do. There's always the algorithm to try to, like, weave your way into, or the thing you think you need to have on your resume or in your portfolio. And then there's the thing which is like, this is just really a thing. I don't know why or what it is, but I keep feeling a pull to it. Oh, I had this idea 10 years ago. Here, like it never left me alone. Right. And so now I'm doing it. Right? I think it's those sorts of things where, again, why are you showing up? Are you showing up to build the resume, or are you showing up to push your passion forth into the world? And if you go, and if the latter, it might be a little bit more of a challenging path, because because most times there is no blueprint. There's going to be markers along the way. But my one of my first interviews was with a woman named Z Holly. Z Holly was the first executive director of the Annenberg Center for Innovation at USC. Serial entrepreneur. I remember I was so excited. I got her on the phone, and she goes, "Well, what do you want to interview me for?" And I was like, it's almost like meeting Clark Kent, and who's Superman. And she just had this almost like an Eeyore kind of energy around her career. And but admittedly, she's like, it's really lonely. It's hard. It looks great on paper, right? And everybody and so we got into that side of it. And I love presenting the challenges of this, because everybody can go to the keynote.
What is your secret for getting people to share their struggles and not just their success stories?
Um,
I mean, I'd say secret, but I say secret in quotes because you're highly
Yeah, I think it's finding common ground, right? I used to refer to these as Me Too moments before the Me Too movement happened. But you meet somebody at a thing, and maybe you're there for it's an AI, gathering, and suddenly you mention bowling, and somebody else is like, I bowl too, and then now you're talking about bowling for 30 minutes, and now you found like a connective tissue beyond what we think we're here for. And I try to at least find that, because I've lived a lot of life, and I can go like, oh, I understand that. I had one client who was like, very first session was like, I'm really nervous. Would you mind sharing something vulnerable with me before we get started? And I was like, wow, right? I let it all out. I think there's an incredibly non-judgmental approach. I mean, I've talked to people who are on both sides of socio-political issues, whether it's wars or who's in office or whatever. And I'm like, that's my personal opinions don't belong here. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm leaning in. I think creating this environment of
Okay, can we lean in a little bit on my personal opinions don't belong here? I think that's so important for you to share with our entrepreneurially focused family members and leaders as well, everybody. I'm saying them in particular because oftentimes entrepreneurs are so passionate about what they've created, and thoughtfully so, they treat it as their child, and so they don't want their child offended. They bring a lot of ideas about how their child should be treated once it's in your environment that you're paying them to bring it into, whether it's a product or a service. And I know Chris, I'm being fully transparent, in our organization, we encourage our implementation teams, don't take your opinions, take your facts, take your processes, listen for their opinions so that you can move it forward and get to know the stories of the people you're working with, not just the stories of their company. Um, do you find that a lot of folks do kind of misstep in that area when they're enthusiastic and their stuff is the new hot stuff? You cuss, I don't cuss, you can put it.
I think there's a super thin line between conviction and malleability. Yes, you have to be convicted that what your thing is belongs in the world. Um, the how and what it also could look like becomes the less precious territory. And so I find often that my job is to just help discover some other ways of looking at it, change the way you look at things, and things you look at will begin to change. Um, and also maybe dig into, once I've developed a relationship well enough, is like dig into like, why are you so rigid about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And through a discussion and a dialogue, we may discover an opportunity, or may discover like, all right, let's stay on track then. It's that level of I don't know. Like the word that comes up to me is feedback. Like we're all constantly in a feedback loop. Whether I'm talking to my kid and they're looking over there and they're not listening, and that's feedback. And then 2 days later, I hear them repeating the thing that I said to their friend, and I'm like, oh, it did penetrate, right? So that's two conflicting, moments of feedback. Because I'm like, oh, I thought you didn't get it, but you got it, right? Or vice versa. You told me you got it, and now here we are 2 days later, you're doing the opposite thing.
And we're not saying people don't have the right to, and entrepreneurs don't have the right to decide who their customers will be. There are some people we don't want as customers. Tommy Hilfiger expressed people he didn't want as customers. There, we're talking about a different thing here, aren't we? We're
Yeah,
talking about once you engage or contract with that customer.
right. Yeah, I think when you're engaging, like, again, that's feedback too. Feedback from the customer that says, "Hey, I don't like the way this happened." Like, well, like we can choose. One of my favorite examples of that is Tony Hsieh, RIP, and Zappos. Zappos famously would say that we're a happiness company that happens to sell shoes. And so what they did was they over-indexed on customer service. You tell me you didn't like those shoes for whatever reason, we will send you your money back and you send them back to us. Where some are like, fill out this form. Why did you not like it? What was the problem? Okay, this is your third time doing, like, whatever it
He
is.
just brought that milk in, and he shared about that, how crazy people thought he was to actually offer that kind of return policy for clients.
Yeah, and it's like, kindness goes along. There's these other sort of, like, we can look at business traits or we can look at human traits. And then we can get to blend the two. And I think humans want to be addressed a certain way, and they want to feel seen, heard, and acknowledged and valued for their participation or their spend or their showing up to the concert, whatever the experience is that we're creating. And I think we forget that, because we built XYZ tool or ecosystem, that we're still serving a human being on the end of that cycle. And I think that's just a small reframe. I remember I was a mentor for Google Launchpad, and went to San Francisco for a week, sat with, I don't know, 40 or 50 different entrepreneur teams. And most of them was like, oh, have you talked to a customer? No. No, like 90% of them had never spoken to somebody. Like, they built a tool, they built sorry, go ahead.
They don't need to get tricked up in the AI-ness of things, believing they don't need to still talk to the people. I call her Aisha in our company because she fabulous, okay? But some call her Siri, some call her whatever. But if you want to start letting them do all the talking for you, you can lose your customer. You've got to keep that human quotient in it, don't you, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the number of times you've called. This happened to me recently. I left my luggage at the airport because I'm absent-minded,
Mhm.
and I.
You were getting there, won't you? You were getting there.
Oh, I was in. Yeah. Well, this is funny. I got on the plane, put my backpack in the overhead compartment, and got ready to grab my other carry-on. I was like, oh, uh-oh, right? And so, but me calling that automated line, I got so frustrated. Press 1 to speak to this person. Press 2 to speak. And then in my brain, I was like, I know I'm going to have to say all this stuff over again when I talk to someone, and I never got to speak to someone. So I think there's always pain points along the customer journey that we can address en route to the final destination. Back in when I worked for OMD, that was one of the things we talked about a lot, was especially for travel clients. It's like, travel next to moving is one of the most, jarring and frustrating things to do, to pack up, get the house ready, especially if you're going on a family vacation, and like making sure you don't come back to a messy house, but you also got to rush. And there's just so many pieces. But we're like, here's a $99 deal for XYZ. How about we help those customers in the other parts of that journey? Maybe there's a cleaning service that you can get when you buy your ticket. Now that, like, I would sign up for that. I may pay an extra 30, 40, $100 in order for my home to be clean when I got home, as
Right.
opposed to, take the $99 flight on Spirit. Shout out to Spirit. So and I think that's where the empathy piece comes in. I'll tell you one quick anecdote from one of my guests who I interviewed, who kicked off this idea of empathy for me. This guy by the name of Dan Goods, who is NASA's visual strategist. He's an artist. They also call him an artist in residence. Most times his job is to turn their scientific concepts into public art experiences. He also helps crafts missions. He works with engineers to get them out of engineering speak into like a little bit more poetry. and so on and so forth. And he said when he was in art school, he had a professor who had him draw a picture of an otter, like the sea. And he said he drew it, turned it in. The professor was like, "This is great." He's like, "Tomorrow, meet me at the pool and bring your swimsuit." He's like, "Okay." So he shows up, and his professor ends up showing him a video of an otter swimming, in its natural environment, underwater, above the water, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, "Now you get in the water and you swim like one." And he said for about 30 minutes to an hour, he mimicked everything he saw, and then got back out and redid the assignment. And of course, it was like 1,000 times better because he lived an experience that, obviously not directly in the shoes, but to whatever extent he could to go there. So, whatever you're building, I mean, I'm sure you've visited the offices of your clients and looked at how their workspaces are and where the break room.
I've been in the restrooms on public airplanes and understood that women didn't participate in the design of them.
Right. Yeah, and it's like there's insights everywhere. There's like there are literally insights everywhere. You just have to kind of keep this an openness to discovery, right? And I think sometimes, like once I mean, I had a boss once who said a good idea is just where you stop thinking.
Well, this is, and we can't leave visionology yet because this is, well, think about it. We know that empowerment comes clearly from defined goals, meaningfulness, support, and independence. Now, your 6 phase visionology process, make sure I get it right: intake, explore, experiment, apply, measure, integrate.
Mm-hmm.
I got it?
Yes.
All of that resonates with what you're talking about right now. Where do you find people struggle the most? Or is it like individual to where their mission is or where their moment is that they hit these struggles with
I
them?
think it's
Because it's a lot. Those 6 are a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's the breaking good habits part, right? I think it is. I think when you step out of your comfort zone and start doing things that are unfamiliar to you or feel, I don't know. I say this all the time. I was like, I know it sounds cheesy, I know it sounds cliche, but just try it. Yeah, I know it sounds weird or feels odd. Like, just try it once. Just try it for a week. Just try it for, and oh, I did the thing. Like I said, I think we all need a little bit of a litmus test in order to like change behavior. We need to like test and then see how it works. And sometimes it doesn't work, and then we go on to like option B. Right. Okay. Well, and then I have to go like, what did that feel like? What did discomfort? What was the like? What did you feel like the result was? What were you thinking? And like, I get to probe a little bit about why there was some discomfort to the degree of not going over the goal line. And it is, it's the same principle that you would do in a pitch. I want to find the one thing that I know is going to resonate in the room and then use that as a gateway to the rest of the stuff. But we got to test out those baby steps first of breaking good habits. Like, oh, this one guy is incredibly smart. And he kept talking about the LinkedIn algorithm. And I was like, yeah, but you're a human being. I'm like, what do you want to say? Like, what do you, and then reverse engineer it so that it fits the algorithm if you choose, right? Because but I think again we get a little bit rigid in the methodologies that we know how to do, and then I think it's freeing once you start seeing like, oh, that did feel a little cool, or it worked, or I had one client who was like, I took what you said and told my mom because I saw her doing the same thing. And I was like, well, now you got to charge me for. I mean, now I got to charge you for your mom too. But it's just like this, this like helping people feel comfortable in the exploration of the things that feel uncomfortable.
Well, at that one group, we say we stand on our feet, right? Freedom to innovate, excellence in delivery, everything and everyone matters. So invest the time to understand. And Chris, your innovation coaching material says innovation is defined by internal and external processes that lead to creation. So, how do you help people move from having ideas to actually implementing them? You've talked about how they ready themselves?
Yeah.
How do they actually move the idea into a thing?
Yeah. Well, like I said, one of the things that comes up is version, like whatever the V1 is.
Yeah.
Know, I don't have enough time. I don't have, I don't have a partner. I don't have XYZ, or we don't have enough money. Like, okay, well, what's the baby step version of this? Like, let's get out of the perfect version. Let's get into the like we're on the path version. Um, I think a lot of times, especially for folks who are pivoting, like making a hard pivot, and they're like, it's like that old thing keeps calling him. I have one client, I like he like shifted our meeting 3 times in a row. And I was like, stop. Like, you said you wanted to do something. He's like, yeah, but work said I have to. It was like, there will always, like, all these things are opportunities for you to practice, like the diligence it's going to take to become this next evolution of you. And they're not just like demands. Now I got to go back here and do this. It's like, how can you manage that better in order to free yourself? As opposed to saying like, oh, I'm the executive director of X, Y, and Z, and therefore when they call, I need to be there. And I'm not saying it's easy. Like, it is not easy at all. I mean, I have an advisor for my company, and he once told me something, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And I did it, and it worked, right? Like, it was just, I was very resistant, and I think there's this like a thin line between resistance and acceptance. Resistance can show up in very small ways, and it's like a grenade. Like, grenades aren't that big; they cause big explosions, right? So, and it's like, oh, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to. I'd rather do it this way. Yeah, but this is what you have, right? This, if you are present, the only thing you have is what's in front of you.
And you can't let where you're working toward overwhelm where you're working from.
Right. Exactly. And in the reverse order.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much. I'll say it again. So much humanality that goes into what we are doing with our vocation. And I think a lot of times we just over-index on the mechanics of the business and not who we are as humans. And I do think it's an internal process, right? To be able to create with a sense of emotional freedom is a lot better than to be doing it with anxiety and stress and fear and everything else. So getting
And
out of
you're talking about that grenade being a little thing with a big explosion. You notice we start with innovation in feet, freedom to innovate. That word free, most people click in on the innovation. The word freedom is the one that scares most of my senior executive leaders because they're like, how do we manage and measure around freedom to innovate? And it's an iterative, ongoing thing you have to be committed to.
Yeah, I mean, there was a company I worked for, and I ran a department there, and I would every other Thursday I would just do a meeting called Thunder Thursdays, and I was like, come with an idea about anything other than work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, if you got a better way to reinvent a shoestring, like let's talk about it. And this is like a gaming oriented organization,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd say 85% of the time we discovered something that was valuable for the business.
Wow, wow, wow.
Because I think there's just like, it's like if you look at something for too long, you almost don't know what you're looking at. Like, I have ADHD, and like how I read, for instance, I can read 5 pages and like look up and be like, wait, what did I just read? And then I have to go back, and now I'm like really focused in on it.
Whereas for me, I have to read at least 2 books at the same time to
See?
keep. Mhm.
Well, and again, I think to that point, it's like, what is your cocktail of tools that you need in order to feel that freedom to like get to the next level? And everybody's different. That's why, like, sure, you can go see, Tony Robbins or Gary V or, Cindy Gallup or whoever it might be. And then we can give you tools and you try to like replicate that. It's great because you're starting to experiment. But then I may take a piece of what Cindy said and a piece of what Gary said and a piece of what Janice said. And now I've created my own little concoction of a thing that works for me.
Years ago, my husband, years ago, Chris, gave me the gift of a Tony Robbins experience. And I got there and I thought I can do everything but walk through the fire. I walked. I walked across the fire, you know? And you're so right. Even though that doesn't articulate out as well as I wanted to you what it meant for me at that point in my growth as a business leader and as a person and as a partner, it made a huge impact. I took more from that than anything else I got at the Tony Robbins experience. And you know, it is jam packed, right? But so I'm just really resonating with what you're saying.
Yeah,
There's
and I
something,
can think, and also think about that thin line again between resistance and acceptance, right? And I don't know
yeah,
how you felt, like probably up until step one of going into the fire. And
yeah.
then you're like, and that is all resistance and hesitancy and tension and stress. And then you're like, okay, it's not as bad as I thought. Let me
And
keep
I
going.
wasn't the first one. They did it, I
Right.
can.
Whatever cushions like showed
Yeah.
up for you, you know, and
Which typically I'm the first one
right.
in my little world, my experience. I'm the first one. When people bio me in front of an audience, they're usually talking about the first. She's the first, this first.
Very much so. Yeah.
You know, I wasn't the first one to walk the fire at Tony Robbins, and I stood in a line and saw people do it. I saw
hmm
people do it before I did.
And I
You
think,
know,
and I
I
think,
was the seventh day of the week.
well, I also think, I mean, what you're talking about is like, we're not 100% the same way in every environment that we are in. So you being a first mover in so many other ways, and then this way you're like, let me see what happens first. Let me, and so I think sometimes we go back to that permission piece. We think we're supposed to be the leader, the person with the knowledge, this like whatever habits we brought to the table, and you're like, yeah, but there are certain things where one of my when I'm doing like workshops, one question I will sometimes ask the group in like in dyads or triads is, when was the last time you tried something for the first time? And the answers vary, but it's like, and then we start digging into what that experience is like, because I'm an expert at this. I used to run brainstorm sessions, and I'd say we had a rule, RIP to a brilliant friend of mine by the name of Nathan Phillips. But we would always say, don't say anything you knew before you came here. We had like three rules in the brainstorm room. So it's like, oh, well, when I worked at such and such, like, nope. It's like, new thoughts only. And it's a really hard prompt to stick to, but it actually leads you to this freedom. So that freedom comes in, again, the emotional the immersion into something new and going like, okay, I'm okay with this. And imagine like showing up to a brainstorm with your team with a little bit lighter, urgency around whatever the mission is. And they were like, oh, Janice is different today. Okay, cool. Like I feel different because I mean, I've been in rooms where it is like high tension, and oh, such and such is coming today. Make sure we have all and now we're all closed up. You can do it, but it's going to be a lot harder for you to get to like the goosebump ideas when you're like a little clammed up.
Well, we've talked about visionology, and I could continue to talk forever with you about it. I pray that I do get the opportunity because it too is an iterative offering from your. I just think you have the most immaculate skill sets to present in front of
Thank
people,
you.
and I adore you for that too. Um, what I wanted to talk about visionology with you, and I had asked you also if we could talk about how you are delivering on psychedelic facilitation. It's
hmm
fascinating to me, the training you've received. And when you first shared a little bit with me, you left me so curious to learn more. How does expanding consciousness, Chris, through this alternative modality inform an understanding of business innovation?
That's a great question, and I actually love that question. Thank you. Um, I don't know, everything we create and engage in is an expression of self,
Is an
right?
expression of
Expression of self.
yes.
I care about this, and if you want to dig into the psychology and the subconscious of it all, is great. What we encounter a lot of times is frustration, opposition, life shit. Like, sorry, I cussed on your show again. But like the things that show up that kind of just, when people talk about like, oh, I'm becoming a new person. I almost talk about it in reverse. We talked about this before. Is like I almost look at it as like we're just getting some of the stuff off of you, right? It's like an archaeological dig. Like the bones and stuff are all there. Sometimes you need a little brush. Sometimes you need the big excavator to like dig all around it. Right. And and that's really, I think that's where the freedom is like I have so much more weight off of me now. And sometimes we don't know what that weight is or where it comes from or why it is. Or maybe we figured out a piece of it and not the whole. And we've been doing the therapy and, exercising and doing all the things right. And there's still something. Or it's your first step and like something's going on. I need to figure this out. And so I think once you have these larger scale realizations, um, then it informs every other step you take, right? And it's not like it's a one and done kind of thing, right? I feel like it's like a psychedelic experience is really just an accelerator. If you're on a quest of some sort, you go through and like you could read the book and go there, which I highly recommend. You do all the things. And then this is just a speed ramp. You're like, all right, like if you're walking through the airport and you leave your luggage, and you go on to the moving sidewalk, you're just going to go a little bit faster for that period of time, and then you go a little bit faster again. But having these sort of macro realizations, whether it's your relationship with higher power or understanding a concept that you like have heard about, but now you go like, oh, I get it. I watched this interview on Diary of a CEO with a monk, and he said sometimes language gets in the way. And I'll couple that with one of my favorite books is the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And it's basically this guy has written he's made up a bunch of words for emotional and life experiences that we don't have language for.
What did we make our word today? We made a word today.
Humanality.
Yes, we did. The humanality.
But
Okay.
but no,
That's our book, Chris. That's our book we're going to do together.
Let's do it.
Hot humanality of things.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. We even got the anagram.
100%.
Hey, Chris, years ago, I was at a Pia Zadora concert. I had gone with my sister who worked for Meshel Rickless, and you'll recall or you can learn that he was married to Pia Zadora. Going up the steps to go to the back of, now I forget the name of the venue, but it was, Hollywood-ish venue. I was going up the step, and coming down the steps was Cary Grant. Now, you got to understand, Cary Grant was the for me. Okay, loved everything he did. Just was, and I told Bernie, my husband, I married you because you looked like Cary Grant. Well, that was partially true. I married him for some like reasons than that. But everybody always knew, that I loved Cary Grant. And I was kind of tongue struck, and he was very much the gentleman in person that he was on screen. And he was acrobatic, right? So, he was handling those steps, and he was over 80 something by the way, and he was doing it. Chris, he said to me, you need to cleanse your mind, and gave me a hug. We had not talked or anything. We were passing. And it's like one of those moments I'll forever remember. It's also a moment that I started to study. And then when you were talking with me this last time, and I told you I became curious about how you're working with psychedelic facilitation, I learned that Cary Grant actually had that as well. Now, I think he used, what's the liquid? Psychedelic. Yeah, I think he used LSD for that. But I'm thinking when you're talking about it giving you a speed ramp toward, your best and your fullest available truth. I'm paraquoting you. Um, how do these all work for us? Because I was thinking the shroom experience really was about helping you to cleanse, but not necessarily like we hide a lot of stuff to keep
Oh
going
yeah. I
sometimes.
tell people all the time.
A lot of stuff to keep going
Yes, I have a great.
versus cleansing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one and the same, right? You know, 'cause there's microdosing and then there's journey experiences, right? So, I had one person that I worked with who was like, "Oh, I felt really great," and then at the end of the day, this is on a microdosing experience. My anxiety came back, and it felt like it came back even more intense. And then we just started talking a little bit more. Come to find out, this person was going through a lot. You know,
But
minority
is it a
entrepreneur,
one experience?
huh?
Is it a one
Well,
experience, or
so
should it be a series of gently and carefully guided?
yeah,
I guess the individual matters, huh?
so microdosing is kind of like taking a vitamin. You know, you may do that every 3 days. You know, maybe you do 5 days on, a couple days, but it's like a very minute amount. If you're gonna go into a journey experience, you're in it for 6, 7, 8 hours, and you're like riding the wave. And in either case, obviously one is a lot more intense than the other. But I always like to say, like, imagine there's a euphoria part of it, right? And so, like, imagine you got your front door open and your back door open, and it's a great day, and you got a perfect cross breeze, and you're like, oh man, this is perfect. You got your laptop on, music blaring, and then a raccoon comes running in the house. You're like, oh, so no, like there's a raccoon in here. And like metaphorically speaking, you knew the raccoon was there. You just kind of like every day you came home, you sidestepped it. You left home at before it was dark, so you wouldn't have to encounter the raccoon, so on and so forth. Like the things that you said, we push away. Now this is an opportunity to actually deal with the raccoon once and for all. You get it out. Do you like, okay, I bet you one thing, that raccoon won't come back, right? You won't. you, you will have dealt with it by this time. And I get that all the time. It's like, well, I don't want to face this. What if this happens? What if this thought comes up? There's some stuff that I don't want to. And I'm like, and so the whole training, the whole underscore of it all is about harm reduction. So harm reduction can just be like emotional safety. So I have to create an environment for, you know, open dialogue, emotional safety. I don't want, what if I do this? It's perfectly fine if you do. We'll get through it. You know, there's breathing exercises, there's reminders, there's so many like tools that I have, or I try to like put into practice that can help alleviate some of the harder parts. And not every journey is hard, not every journey is amazing. Some of them are like both. Like there's no, every human being is different, so every way the medicine might interact with you is going to be different.
And you're there for a particular reason in a different season.
Right. And or you like, you know, much like life, right? You're like, I'm going to work on this. It's like, yeah, maybe. Right. Gary Vaynerchuk said this recently. It was just like, maybe is probably the best word you can use when you are on a journey of any sort. It's like, I'm going to do this. Yeah, maybe it'll look like that. Like it just leaves the door open for other possibility. It doesn't mean that you're abandoning the mission in any way. So if I say like, I would like to have more clarity about my family, like maybe you'll get more clarity about your family. Maybe something else will pop up. I don't know, but like, so set your intention. Be as you know. It's like another one of my favorite quotes is, "We plan, God laughs." You know, I'm sure there's a number of things in your life where you've been like, "I'm gonna do this," and then a car accident happens, or you got to abandon ship, or the money didn't show up. So it's we all have to like learn. That's where the acceptance and resistance piece comes in. Whether you're in a medicine journey because you're like, I don't want to. Here we go. And you know, and my goal is just to help create a space for that exploration. I
What's
don't
your favorite exercise to help somebody gain clarity when they're kind of feeling stuck in that business or creative process?
favorite exercise. Um, that's a good one. It, I feel like everybody's different. I don't know. Like it's so individualized, and the things that we get caught up on are all different. Again, I have like a long list of prompts and questions I like to ask. So I'll give you an example. I'm like, you know, who's the person you feel most comfortable around? And they'll be like, oh, Joe, my husband, or whoever they just. And I was like, what does that feel like when you're around that person? What? Oh, I get to be this, and I laugh, and I talk. I use this. Like, I was like, well, what's preventing you from doing that at work? What's preventing you from being that? Because anytime, even in relationships, right? It's like I love how I feel around this person, and so therefore you want more of that person. But really, what that did is unlock something in you that was already there, and now it's yours. And so we very easily make an association to a stimuli that, like, oh, as long as Joe is around, then I get to be this person. And it's like, no, my brother passed last year, and his two oldest kids were both like, they just started like rekindling their relationship with him. He was coming around a lot more, and so on and so forth. And individually, they both said to me, like, we just started getting, re- repairing things, and we didn't have enough time. Both of them said we didn't have enough time. And I was like, just because he's gone doesn't mean you don't have to stop doing the work. Like, the door has been open for you to repair something in you, and you get to continue doing that. Like, imagine you never got to even experience that to know what it was like to then continue to pursue it. So, it's that. So, I'm just giving you an example of like a prompt to help somebody, begin to see the opportunities differently. I can't, like, in my world, because I did stand-up comedy and I loved writing and I wrote comedy for a bunch of years. For a long time, I didn't think jokes belonged in the business world, and I couldn't be too businessy in the entertainment world. And I was always trying to like show up and be what I thought this environment was supposed to dictate. But then, lo and behold, my superpower in the brainstorm room is me cracking jokes. Most of the ideas that I got to execute or come up with started with some kind of really stupid pun or an offensive statement, to the degree of which now sometimes when I facilitate sort of group brainstorms and things, I do an exercise that I call bad idea, good idea. And you get the group, you give them 2 minutes, whatever the problem is we're trying to solve, write down as many terrible ideas as possible, like the worse the better. And then, after the time goes up, people go around the room and share, and then like everybody laughs and how bad. Oh my God, I can't believe you said that, et cetera, et cetera. And then, ha 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 dies down. And I go, all right, let me put another 3 minutes on the clock and take one of those and turn it into a great idea. And what that does, if you're the type of person that says, "Oh, I'm not creative," it democratizes creativity in the room. Because now, and we've all now said the dumb thing, because I think that's the other thing we're fearful of in a brainstorming environment, is like, "Oh, I want to be the shining star," whether you say that with those words, but like we want to be the one that like everybody goes, "Yay, Janice, you saved us," right? But if you say like, "I'm just going to say dog," and that's my contribution, and somebody else says the next word, and there's a bunch of different exercises to do that. But I think getting out of your own way through democratizing creativity, doing the thing that's uncomfortable and bad first, and then coming back and going like, "Oh, I can do this. I can turn it into," and then you go back around the room, and now you've got 20 ideas to solve this one issue, right? Now you have you have the problem of wealth of ideas. So I don't know.
Which is what I always come away from lunch with you. So, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, wow, when you talk about, okay, so you're with that person, you're having that experience because basically you become the person you want to be when you're around them. And that's very much how I feel when we lunch. So when we lunch has to happen soon again. Um, Before we go to 4 for 4, there's a conversation I want you to have, Chris, because your work spans organizations, like we said. I mean, we didn't mention the White House, and I think I did mention NASA. But what's your best case scenario or conversation about how innovation can transform both business and society in this next decade? We hit lightly that AI is out there. I told you Aisha's my girl, Aisha. How can each of us really contribute to that transformation I'm talking about, regardless of our position or our resources? You shine so brightly in decomplicating, clarifying, and then building out something that's, as I mentioned earlier, dynamic and incredible. Whether you're doing that with teams in Fortune 500 organizations or individuals, talk, just give us a little conversation on that.
I'll touch on the White House thing for a second, because I think that for me it was kind of like, oh, that was great. So with the Obama administration, they used to have a global entrepreneurship summit. So once a year, they'd gather in some part of the world and bring together up and coming entrepreneurs and established entrepreneurs to, exchange tools, resources, ideas, get funded, the whole nine. I was an advisor to that program, and so I got to sit with a lot of the founders and a person in Haiti who redesigned an oven based on how the homes are built there and like it's more efficient, whatever. And then simultaneously, I was doing storytelling, so I would interview folks like Daniel Lubetsky, the CEO of Kind, whose parents were escaped Nazi Germany and went to Mexico. So he's a Latin Jew. And he talks about that and how that feeds into the kindness business. Or Julie Hanna, who's the godmother, jokingly called her mother of dragons, but like the godmother of crowdfunding. She created keep.org, and it was the first sort of micro funding site and movement. Damon John, like the list goes on and on. So like I got to see both like the brains of these people who are like creating very, very new ways of being, and also the folks who are like, I'm trying to figure it out, right? And so there's that. I think you kind of mentioned AI in the phrasing of your question, and I have this theory. I haven't written it down, but I've talked about it. We're about to enter the fifth industrial revolution. Right. When you think about agriculture and the steam engine and how that just changed society, like if you had a horse farm because the Pony Express and all the United States bought all your ponies to help deliver mail, and then the steam engine came out, you were like, your whole family was fucked, right? Like your whole livelihood went away, or you had to find a way to pivot, and do things. And I think every cycle of revolution disrupts to a
But
great
don't be
degree.
the ice man thinking you're selling ice when you're selling people want refrigeration.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's, and I think we get especially now because there's so much cross communication, like we get so precious about what it is we do and how we show up and how we make our money. And rightfully so, like you should have your passion points. But I think what happens when thousands of people are laid off, jobs are threatened, holding companies, even in the marketing, industry, are like shrinking and combining and acquiring and so on and so forth, and jobs are being lost. The questions that come up for us become like, well, what am I going to do now? Right. And who am I? And so this fifth industrial revolution is ourselves. It becomes like we're not asking questions about how to do X. We're like, how can I express? How can I provide? Who am I in this ecosystem? Oh, I thought I was going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. Now I can't. So we revisit these things. And as challenging as that is, it's also a huge opportunity. Like if you look at it that way, and regardless of the position of resource, I mean, that is, maybe it's a overly westernized ideal, but this idea that you can kind of create and invent and do despite whatever is going on around you. And we all have had multiple iterations of self in some way, shape, or form. I have a real estate license. I sold real estate for 2 years, and I wasn't very good at it. So it's like, and I thought that was gonna be, but for a minute I thought that was, and this was after I had like had my first writing job, and that's really what I moved to LA for. So, these cycles of reinvention we get to go into, if we can enter that with a sense of enthusiasm and courage and trust, and so many other traits. But then I feel like we have a lot of opportunities, because if there's anything that's true, is like humans are extremely inventive and resilient, and we've been disrupted before. Civilizations have risen and fallen, and um, I guess I'll close this story out with a little anecdote. I went to Mexico City in November of last year, and part of it is I went on this hot air balloon ride over Teotihuacan, which is like these pyramids that are there. On the tour, the guy goes like, it's this massive piece of land. The pyramids are beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, at one point in time, this civilization, the Teotihuacans, were feeding 200,000 people a day. And it takes a lot of resources to do that, and also it spoke to how much resource they had, like money, power, et cetera, et cetera. But also feeding all those people took a lot of resources. So to burn the ovens and to do all the things. So they were like, look around you. this area used to all be rainforest. It is not rainforest anymore. It is just barren land. And so they ended up changing the climate. They went through famine and drought and died out. The pyramids are overgrown with grass and everything else, to the point where they just look like hills. Um, 300 years later, the Mayans like recognized the sort of math of the geometry and the shapes that were there, and they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is a pyramid." So I think there were civilizations we destroy, we like we rise and we fall, and I think there's a great acceptance in that. Like, we just happen to be in the midst of one, or some of us feel like we're in the midst of one of those shifts. And then you couple that with like the Mayans 250 years prior had discovered there was a religious, like a shaman, was like had a dream of a symbol, and he's like, that symbol is where we're supposed to go next. And that stayed in Mayan culture until they found this land, which is again almost 2.5 centuries later. And as you know, whether it's religious conviction or intuition or something that's just like, I think I'm supposed to do that. I don't know why, where, how it's going to happen. And a 300-year conviction is is massive, but it also just speaks to like all the shift that you're talking about, and where we get to show up, and to your point, like the next 10 years. It is this sort of like acceptance and personal reinvention that we have that opportunity.
I think that's beautiful, and I think it's a thought that we can leave this part of the conversation with. Is there anything I should have asked you that you really want to share about right now?
Nothing I can think of. I don't know.
Because we talk enough.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
I
not
can
in
laugh.
each other's ear all the time, but we talk enough, don't we? I love it. Let's go 4 for 4.
Okay, I have
Four
no idea what
questions.
that means, but I'm here for it.
4 questions. You'll give me 4 answers. No wrong or right answers. And the first question is, you get to host a dinner party. Anybody from any point in history, past to present, can be at that table. Preferably a human versus humanoid.
Hmm.
Your choice, though.
How many people? 4.
4. Who's at your table and why?
Prince.
Why?
I feel like I keep discovering Prince music, like songs I've never heard before, but also just his uniqueness and his unapologetic uniqueness and how he showed up in the world. And there was a quietude about him. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
like, I want to be like, what are all the thoughts? Where, what goes on inside your brain and body?
He was so kind, and like as with many other performers, he gave that moment of prayer and gift to his team before they went out on every stage, didn't
Absolutely.
he? Mm.
I'll stick with music for a second because this one these are just popping into my head as we're speaking. Rick Rubin, the co-founder of Def Jam. Like, I love the creative act book. I also, I sometimes jokingly refer to myself as the Rick Rubin of innovation, where once saw him in an interview and it was like, "Oh, do you have any? Can you play an instrument?" No, like I can't code. You know what I mean? I have no hard skills. I understand how ideas and
You
mechanics.
don't have to code anymore.
Right. Well, you know what I'm saying? Like I look at my this is my handwriting, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's terrible. But I can like sit with someone and understand like where the opportunities are for them internally and externally. But I think he's done it to such a degree that
You
I'm
you
just
got you got Prince and Rick Rubin. Okay, I can't wait to hear who the other two are. I'm so excited.
I'll go with Barack Obama. Only because I wish we weren't recording, but I just want to know like what was really going on. Like what what I mean?
In terms of and when.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
full life you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's like I mean during his presidency, just like his life. I think when you're the first, like that comes with a lot of like stuff. To be the leader of the free world in that capacity is different than me trying to start my widget company, right? To be the first one to start my widget company, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And Shel Silverstein. So I was reading Shel Silverstein to my son one night, and I started like singing the poetry. And I was like, somebody should make a musical using all Shel Silverstein poems. So if you're like the Giving Tree, Where the Sidewalk Ends, just for the folks that are out there. And then I got nosy enough to like, yeah, somebody should. I wonder what's up with his life rights. And then I dug in. This dude fought in the Korean War. Used to hang out at the Playboy Mansion. Wrote award-winning, Grammy-winning country music. He had a daughter who died. He had another woman that he married who also like he just lived like beyond what that little silly picture of him on the back of the book with his beard and jacked up teeth. It's like what a full life, right? And I think oftentimes we know somebody for one thing. Even for, like you, it's like, all right, I know Act One. I know there's so much more to you than what people like typically approach you with. Find out somebody's like a tennis star or like they're these multifaceted human beings, but like the balance and the expression of all those things. And in a time where we didn't also have like social media like we have it today. And I think even with social media, like we still get locked into, oh, I have to keep showing up this way. But I would like to evolve, but I still keep showing up this way. And my brain is like expanding into other things. But I feel like, with a lot of musicians, for instance, by the time you like write a song, you record it, then you make an album, then you go on tour, like you're talking a 2-3 year process. I'm not the same person I was when I wrote the song that you love. In fact, now I hate it. Right. But I would rather be making this kind of music or doing this
Yeah.
as a career. And now I'm locked into this contract, a public perception,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And but folks that get to like a Donald Glover who get to be multifaceted, we all get to be it, but like he's showing us in real time like how it's done. And so I that's where I go with Shel Silverstein.
Gosh, I want to know what the menu is. Um,
Yeah, totally.
let's let's go to maybe I'll come cook and I can be a part of that conversation.
Yes.
Um, let's go 2 for 4.
Okay.
So, what music are you listening to and why?
Oh man, that's a problem.
You and I both love lots of different.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna give you. This is because my music is. I'm a music nerd, but there's 2 playlists I will share with you after this. I created a Visionology playlist. I created 2 Visionology playlists. One that kind of like addresses the up and down, like emotional roller coaster we're all on. Like, how do we show up for work and our families and all the, and stay centered and do all the things. And it's like it's some good tunes on there. Then there's Visionology 2, which I haven't published yet. It's coming out in an article in a few weeks, which is a little bit more like, it's got like a little spring vibe to it. So it's like the joy of creating, right? But I will listen to anybody from Brent Faiyaz to, I just discovered a Prince song yesterday. That's why I brought it up. And I was like, where did this one come from? To I don't know, like I went down a Ray Charles catalog recently. Then I go down my ignorant hip hop. I have a playlist called Duos in Ignorance, where it's just like rappers going off on like all the things that that hip hop is known for. But I'm probably a hip hop kid at heart. Like that's
Yeah.
where that's what I grew up with.
So, if you love hip hop, then underneath that is some serious soul music for you too.
Absolutely.
You're all over the place like me. I love it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
love it.
like I do my Karunga
After
band.
all, it's just 7 notes, right? It's what they do with it.
Oh, exactly. Well, even when you asked me earlier, like somebody who how do somebody who's fresh starting out and how do they do something with nothing? I'm like, the first answer that I thought of was like, look at hip hop, right? We don't have instruments here. We have electricity and we have records,
Yeah.
right? Like, we don't have band in school. Like we're not learning music that way. But we found a way to create an entire like multi-billion-dollar, 50-year-long industry. And think about, despite like the underlying like problems in hip hop, like the jobs that have been created, the opportunities that people have had, what they've been able to do for their families, what it's led them to do, two,
The
three iterations
reinvention of the
ahead.
supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I always talk about this like invisible domino effect. Like we can look at one element of it, but I think there's this like, oh, this happened and then this happened, and like you can trace things back, the etymology of like how things got to be, and go
Yeah,
like,
from the boot of a car, the trunk of a car,
yes,
to the click of a key.
absolutely, yeah. And this, so I feel like anyway, that's where my hip hop like proclivities send me.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good place to take us on music, and you're going to share the playlist. That's awesome.
Yep.
Let's go 3 for 4.
Okay.
What 4 books do you recommend to this family, and why?
Um, First one comes to mind is Manuscript Found in Accra. It's a Paulo Coelho book. I love it because much like kind of where you were talking about this next 10 years, like there was this small city near Babylon, there was a war happening, and they all knew that they were about to die. And so they go to this one wise man's home who kind of had moved into the neighborhood 10 or 15 years prior, and they just start asking him questions about life, and each chapter is one question. The book is about that thin, and it's like, wow, right? I think there's that. I'm probably on my fourth read of Conversations with God, like the book one. Again, like I feel like we can learn to see life from a macro perspective. There's that. I'm reading Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, which is great because it almost makes the mystical and the woo woo make scientific sense. And you go like, oh, okay, so it's not just like crystal balls and turbines, right? It's it is like these are scientific facts, and you start to really get into
My mom used to say, Chris, the more I see science, the more I know God.
that. Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think I mean, and don't get into like how biomimicry, right? And like how our bodies and certain systems in our bodies mimic actual like organisms and systems in nature and all that stuff. I think there's a lot there. Fourth would probably be, I'm going to go with the creative act. I mean, I got a ton, and I have my list that I prescribe to my clients. No, I'm going to go with No More Mr. Nice Guy. It is a great book for guys because I think how, especially how the conversations around toxic masculinity and how we show up and women's equality and like all the things that we are undoing. I think this book actually helps us to understand how we as individuals show up, as men, like, in the whatever traditional sense, male-bodied humans. But it's pretty fascinating, and I think I recommend that to. I'm actually starting a men's group, like a men's visionology group, and I was like, that's the book I'm going to have as sort of our little
How
required.
many are in the group that when you complete the size?
We'll probably net out around 20, 25. Like we want to have some form
Nice.
of intimacy. This,
Enough to have a lot of diversity of thought
yeah, and
and
also like,
experience, but still close enough for it to matter and be meaningful
yeah, and
and
I think attentiveness
you know
and depth like
actionable.
kind of have to be a part of it. And I think once you get too wide, like you can't go too deep. Especially in the amount of how this is structured and the amount of time that we'll have per session, is a little. We just have to be careful about it. That's all.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I know you said it was for men, but I'm looking forward to learning how it
We
goes.
can do a whoa men's group.
Oh well,
Whoa,
man.
whoa, man. Whoa,
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 man.
whoa, man.
Whoa, man. Okay, Chris, that's us. That's us, right?
Yeah.
Let's go 4 for 4.
Okay, here we go.
4 pieces of advice to our family. And please, if it's advice that's been shared with you by someone else, pay homage to the author.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Two have already come up. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will begin to change. It's just like questioning your own perspective on stuff. If you're solving a real problem, it's like, all right, how can we look at this differently? Maybe you want to put on a voice, or like, I don't know, I've goofed off with Chat GPT and like, say this how Mary Poppins would say it, right? And like, it'll give me, a different thing. But like being in that habit of questioning your so-called truth or reality,
What did she say? Positively perfect in every possible way.
right. Very good.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Who,
yeah,
who
yeah.
knew you would be quoting Mary Poppins today? Nobody.
Who knew I got 2 children and now 2
Oh
grandbabies?
yeah, there you go. Expansion. the Howroyd expansion pack. The this one, I said, I welcome all the possibilities I never knew existed. I think it's, sometimes from my life, it was just like, I was like, some things aren't clicking. And I was like, you know what? I don't know all the possible answers. And I know very truthfully that I don't know. Right. And so, but the more, so embracing these possibilities that I didn't know existed just means like certain things will show up, or I will discover things if I remain open to that and not saying like, this is the path, this is the way. And granted, there is value in like charting a territory and heading out in a direction, but also like, I want to be surprised. I want to be surprised damn near every day of my life. I want to go like, oh, I didn't. Wow, look what happened. Good, bad, and different, and even the challenges. How can I learn from that? Because there's a possibility in that. Another piece of advice. This is going to be another recycled one. Is to keep using that word maybe. You know, I think the like conviction is great. Maybe there's something else.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, Chris, you is brilliant. You is generous, and you is a pioneering hero.
Thank you. And
Although you're gonna be a pioneering shero in the movie about me.
there should be. There should be.
Okay.
Who's
All
gonna
right.
say
What are you
first?
gonna say? What are you gonna say, Boo?
Oh, who's I gonna say?
No, you were gonna say something.
Oh, I was being silly. I said who's gonna play
Tell
first?
me a joke. Tell me a joke. Tell me a
Oh
joke.
boy. The last time you had me do this, remember I was like, the joke was highly inappropriate. Um, I don't know a joke. Um,
Long as you ever took to give an answer to.
because I was like, they're all
No, because I treasure my craft. I treasure still a craft,
yeah.
right?
All right. This is again. It's gonna be
Man walks into a store.
no.
Go on.
What do you call a deer with no eyes?
What do you call a deer with no eyes?
No idea. It goes on if you wanna go to parts 2 and 3. What do you call a deer with no eyes and no legs?
What do you call them?
Still, no idea. All right, hold on. You ready? What do you call a deer with no eyes, no legs, and no penis?
What, Chris?
Still, no fucking idea. All right. Yeah. So.
Okay, you know what?
I love you too.
I love you too, boo. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too. Okay. I'm going to see you in November in Miami.
Yes, I like that.
All right. We don't have to wait till November, though. If we're both in LA at the same time, let's do it, okay?
I'm sure I will find you in the streets,
Okay.
deliberately or otherwise. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I think somebody may have ruined that symbol for us by the name of Sean Combs. But
you know what? Nobody can take it away from us.
it's true.
Don't let
anybody take your heart.
Right. So here we go.
Yeah, let's do it again. All right, it's wrong.
Okay.
My heart's over here.
Okay, where's mine? Right here?
Yeah, little left of center. That's what they say. Or maybe maybe you just have a big heart.
Okay.
Thank you.